Hello and welcome to another episode of the GodisaGeek Retrocast. I'm your host Lee Garbett, and joining me for some fighting is Robin Parker.
Ow.
So as you can see, we've just had a few little logos there, the classic Sega, and Acclaim, and then Probe. We're not doing a scrolling shooter this time. We're going to be playing Mortal Kombat 2 on the 32X, which is a slightly different version than what most people are used to. The game originally came out in the arcades in '93, and then home versions followed with the SNES and Mega Drive and a few other systems like PC and Amiga. But we've decided to go on to the 32X version because it's probably one of the definitive versions of the game, with a bit more improved graphics and sound.
Yeah, definitely everything a bit sort of crisper and just closer to the arcade experience.
Definitely. I mean, this was a time where different versions of the same game on different systems were vastly different to each other. And this is definitely one of those examples.
Yeah, because something like the Mega Drive might have struggled a bit sometimes to match up the graphical capabilities of the SNES, but obviously with 32X with the extra power could really sort of hammer home that lead and get closer to the experience you had actually playing the game in the arcade.
Certainly. I always loved Mortal Kombat 2. It was definitely one of my favourite Mortal Kombat games, just because it took everything that from the first game and just really improved on it. It fixed a lot of faults, and it was definitely a more rounded experience. But it had that silliness with the friendships and balances, but it never got too silly.
Yeah, and it added a lot more, some more interesting characters, a slightly larger roster as well. Obviously, for the home versions, you actually got blood, which was missing from the SNES home version of Mortal Kombat 1, although it was present in the Mega Drive version. So SNES owners got their first taste of blood in a Mortal Kombat game.
Of course, SNES owners with the original Mortal Kombat were used to punching sweat their foes, as they coloured the blood into grey for some reason. And of course, they removed all the fatalities, replacing them with kind of punches and kicks that were apparently a finishing move.
Yeah, they were pretty lackluster.
So quite a difference to this version then, which is obviously full of claret, some very gruesome fatalities. If you get this level right, you can actually uppercut your opponent into the acid background, which is a very grisly way to die.
Yeah, obviously, the fatalities are what makes Mortal Kombat. That's really what made it stand out. Street Fighter obviously was a rule in the roost, but it was pretty much a fairly clean cut beat 'em up. It's just straightforward punches, kicks, special moves. Mortal Kombat really ramped up the violence, brought in the blood, the guts, and the death.
Certainly, I mean it's one of the reasons why we have a rating system in place for games today. The original game was a big part of that, and through some very high profile Senate hearings to discuss this game, or Mortal Kombat and Night Trap in terms of censorship and the like, and of course the ramifications of that are still felt even today.
Yeah, possibly one of the things which added to that, the use of digitised graphics sort of made it closer to actually humanity as well. You're killing each other, but it's actually something which looks very much like another human being because of the use of real actors and digitised graphics. And obviously, talking of Night Trap, which was full motion video as well.
Of course, I mean the technique had been used in previous Midway games such as Narc and Pit Fighter, but it was used in far greater effect in the Mortal Kombat series, which of course what the controversy was, and then the fact that there was blood and fatalities didn't help either.
No, and I think that, as you say, the addition of the friendships and the babalities was just sort of, I think, poking a bit of fun at the people who tried to say they were too violent.
Certainly, I mean there were a lot of alities in this game. I think each character had at least one or two fatalities. Add to that to the babalities and the friendships as well, and there were a lot of hidden things. And of course, back in those days we didn't have the internet, so we relied on word of mouth or magazines at the time to get our fatality fix.
Yeah, or even TV shows like Games Master.
Ah, yes, or Bad Influence. Back in the day, where you had to set your video recorder to record the end of the show and then pause through the pages at the end to get the fatalities you wanted.
Yeah, I mean, there was just, you didn't get a list of moves when you bought the game. You had to either work them out for yourself or really read up in magazines, because things like fatalities often had some pretty complex back, forward, up, down, A-B combinations, which, you couldn't work that out for yourself.
No, certainly not.
You'd have to find it from somewhere, somehow. And otherwise, you just have the old trusty uppercut for a finisher, because you couldn't work out what the fatality was.
Of course, that's always the go-to move, the uppercut. This is how I've been using Scorpion, because he's usually my go-to person in a Mortal Kombat game. I know it's the obvious choice, but something about that spear and uppercut combo that is always satisfying.
Yeah, he's one of the most iconic characters. Ultimately, you got a babality. Turning Kung Lao into a little baby, complete with his razor-rimmed hat, though, of course.
He does make a cute little babby. Interesting trivia fact for you: the original Mortal Kombat was envisioned to be a Jean-Claude Van Damme game. Of course, somewhere along the line that deal fell through, and of course he ended up starring in the Street Fighter film.
And then, which was in turn made into a game using digitised actors.
Of course, so it's interesting how these things come around.
Yeah, so it ended up looking like very much a rip-off of Mortal Kombat, albeit with Street Fighter characters and moves.
Definitely.
But it was definitely a lesser cousin to both of those games.
Originally, we were intending on showing you the Mega Drive version of the game. The reason for that was I actually wanted to show you a hidden fatality in the game that is in no other version. It's quite unique. It was called the Fergality, and you'd have to unlock it using a cheat code to begin with, and then using Raiden on the armory stage and putting a particular button combo would turn the opponent into Fergus McGovern, who's the boss of Probe Software. With smoke coming out of his arse. Unfortunately, due to technical issues, I couldn't capture that version. But we have got this 32X version, which is unique. It does have better graphics and sound, as I was mentioning before. And it's interesting to see this version of the game. I originally thought there were no changes, but if you compare it to the other versions, there are some changes. I mean, even the energy bars are different in this version.
Yeah, it's unique in being a 32X game, which was actually half decent.
It's true that even if it is a port, so to speak.
Yeah, which came around about almost 2 years, well, 1.5 to 2 years after the original version came out, which was by the time this was released on 32X, most people probably will have got their Mortal Kombat 2 fixed.
Very possible. I mean, the lure of better sound effects probably not really enough to make people want to buy a 32X.
Only the hardened beat-em-up fans who really wanted the arcade experience.
Of course.
Of which there are plenty, I suppose.
Of course, Mortal Kombat 2 would spawn a whole heap of bloody beat-em-ups in its wake. The likes of Time Killers was relatively popular in the arcade because it had a ridiculous number of fatalities. The unreleased Tattoo Assassins, which promised hundreds of fatalities. Of course, the game was never released, but it's very, very odd work on YouTube for that one. So I think that there were many other games of its ilk. Primal Rage, it's the Harryhausen style plasticine dinosaurs fighting. Scrapping.
Another Midway title, yeah.
Yeah, it was Atari Midway, wasn't it? I think it was.
Yeah, and then there was I remember, I think there was a title on the Atari Jaguar beat 'em up, which was
Kasumi Ninja.
Yeah, which used digitised actors, but not with much success.
Yeah. So
and a very strange sense of humour.
Yeah, I mean, I think Naughty Dog's first game was a bloody beast 'em up, Way of the Warrior, I think, something like that.
Yeah, that rings a bell.
See, my favourite fatality is the Scorpion.
Yeah, I mean, Mortal Kombat 1 and 2 really spawned so many not only iconic characters like Scorpion and Sub-Zero, as you see here, but also the catchphrases like "come over here" with the spear, and "Toasty" with the uppercuts. I mean, a lot of these things, you wouldn't think it nowadays, but they really entered popular culture at the time. Everyone knew about it, and it spawned all sorts of merchandising, television series, films, toys,
comics, the lot.
Sticker albums, yeah.
Cartoons.
It was all conquering at the time, Mortal Kombat. It was everywhere, really. I mean, obviously helped by the controversy it created, but it was literally everywhere. It was definitely bigger than Street Fighter for quite some time there. Although it may not have had quite the sticking power, and it didn't perhaps have as many good iterations over the years, although thankfully it's found its feet again with its latest version on the next-gen consoles.
Certainly, and the most recent Mortal Kombat certainly feels like almost like a successor to Mortal Kombat 2, so that's why I think it's so popular.
It thankfully ironed out a lot of the inconsistencies in the storyline over the years, and actually made, for once, the story of Mortal Kombat game kind of made a bit of sense.
Almost, it's got quite almost.
As close as you can hope for with Mortal Kombat.
A lot has been made about Mortal Kombat's digitised characters, but something I always thought that was overlooked were the backgrounds. They were very interesting designs, very surreal in places, such as this portal location. If you ever get a chance to see some of, I think it was John Vogel or Tony Vogel, I think that's the name of the artist. Get a look at some of his concept art for some of the earlier Mortal Kombat games, and they're very well drawn, literally scanned into the game in most cases.
Yeah, and they develop from the sort of more realistic, worldly levels to, as you go through the game, you're moving towards the outer world and the more abstract, strange levels, which as you enter the realm of Shang Tsung and Shao Kahn. It's quite original designs there.
That's another thing that I thought separated Mortal Kombat from its peers, was it actually tried to come up with some sort of overarching narrative, not just there's a tournament, we're having a fight. It was more that, obviously the original Mortal Kombat was pretty much a tournament. Each character has their own motivations for being there. But as we've got the second game here, we've got Shao Kahn's desire to rule the world, basically, and that would be a story that continued throughout the series.
Yeah, I mean, there was and that sort of also led. There's a lot of secrets and little hidden touches throughout the series, such which referenced sort of past characters, such as here on screen. You've got Kano and Sonya Blade chained up in the background, of course, who were from the first game and made appearances and but then you had hidden things like extra characters to unlock, extra bosses you could find, strange little bonuses in the background of levels. It was jam packed full of extra little Easter eggs to find. Mortal Kombat 2, more so than any other game probably at the time.
Certainly, another interesting bit of trivia. You saw Kano in the background there. Although Kano would not feature in the game at all, the actor who played him, Richard DiVizio, would actually be playing Baraka. So he's actually the guy under the mask.
Oh, I never knew that one either. Of course, you're fighting Reptile now, who you could unlock in the game through a series of quite obscure acts you had to do.
Yeah, that was the original game, I believe. If you saw a silhouette on the pitch stage and you did I think it was double flawless, you'd unlock him.
There were other characters like Smoke and Noob Saibot, and there was lots of little extra touches thrown in, little people you could discover.
Sure was. So mentioning random merchandising, I mean, as you say, Mortal Kombat was a immediate phenomenon, and some of the actors in the games did actually go on to star in a short-lived stage tour for Mortal Kombat, actual martial arts on stage, which is something you don't really see much from games these days.
No, not at all. But unfortunately, none of those featured in the film. I don't think, did they? They were replaced with more capable actors, perhaps.
Yeah, of course. The only thing that did carry over from the games was the voice of Scorpion, Ed Boon, one of the creators of the game himself.
Had a very iconic sound. Yeah, it wouldn't have been right having someone else do it.
Well, and he was known for making funny voices for a lot of Midway games. He also contributed voices to some of their arcade titles as well, such as a pinball table named Funhouse. Of
course, now you're finally getting towards the end of the game where you meet up with the bosses.
It's very terrible bosses as well. I mean, terrible as in really fearsome beasts.
Well, the bosses, had a real reputation for being pretty cheap and hard to beat on Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, I mean, this is playing on very easy at the moment, and I'm getting my ass kicked a lot. It's very easy. It's very, very tough. I found that a lot of my tactics involved a lot of sweeps and a lot of drop kicks, but even then, the enemy will catch you out quite a lot.
Yeah, in order to beat the bosses for all the sort of four-armed characters like Kintaro in this game and Goro in the first Mortal Kombat, you would have to definitely employ your own cheap tactics, cheap and dirty, if you wanted to beat them, because they were going to do it to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Shao Kahn, the game's end boss, I'm sure he could not be hit by projectiles or something like that. So the bosses in these games did cheat, and so you never really felt bad about getting a couple of cheat moves in every now and then.
No, not at all. By the time you finally beat them, you'd be so frustrated you'd do anything to win.
Just ripped off Scorpion's arms there. It's quite gruesome fatality. Not a good way to go.
Of course, this game, you didn't. Am I right in believing you didn't have the test of mights that you had in the first Mortal Kombat?
That's right. That is something they did remove. I know originally they did want to have some of those in, such as one called Test Your Sight, which is something they wouldn't realise until far later on in the series. In fact, they completely removed them for some reason. I think that's mainly because the game wasn't so much focused on earning a high score as it had been.
Yeah, it was always a fun little distraction, having to hammer the buttons in order to break the increasingly difficult objects, such as a block of wood, blocks of stone, and
Ruby.
I think Ruby and Diamond towards the end. But that was always fun as well, and the Test Your Might became pretty iconic.
Of course, not as iconic as the classic Mortal Kombat battle cry in all the adverts at the time.
Oh, and the sort of techno theme tune which came out as well. The charts.
Yeah, that was the from the movie by the Immortals, and I think that's a piece of music that's kind of worked its way into pop culture even today. I'm sure it's used in America a lot in marching bands and things like that. It's kind of found its place in the zeitgeist, so to speak.
Yeah, a lot of memes based around that thing.
We're just fighting Kintaro at the moment, and as you'll find out, he is a bastard.
I believe the Goro and Kintaro, rather than being actors, were partially animated, I believe, weren't they?
Yeah, they were claymation, stop motion animations, basically.
Which is very much, as you were referring to earlier, what they went on to do with Primal Rage, with all the dinosaur characters.
Well, while you finish watching Kintaro kick my ass, we're going to have to leave you for now. But we'll see you again next week for some more retro-related video goodness. As always, you can see all our videos at www.GodisaGeek.com. You can follow us at theretrocast.com and check out all our other content. So until next week, we will see you later.
Goodbye.